Bhagavate Ramakrishna. Om, salutations to Bhagavan Ramakrishna. We're going to speak today on slaying the specter of death. There is a passage in the Mahabharata where the King Yudhishthira was asked, what's the most wonderful thing in the world? And he says, every day people around are dying, and yet we think we will not die. Ahanni ahanni bhutani gachanti yama mandiram, etc. Now this is the most wonderful thing. Slaying the specter of death. What specter? Well, it's something feared, widely feared. It's pervasive as having danger, unpleasantness. The fear of death in Sanskrit is called abhinivesh. Swami Vivekananda translates it as the clinging to life. It is one of the substructures of the mind. Rather, I would say it is one of the structures of the mind. And to become a perfect yogi, one will have to overcome this structure of the mind. Where does this fear, this specter of death come from? Well, Swami Vivekananda in his characteristic way says, all our knowledge comes from experience. And that goes also for the fear of death. We have experienced this before. It's a simple, very simple proposition. So, the only way out of this universal experience is spirituality. That's the only way to kill the specter. As one of the great poets says, all things in this world are fraught with fear. Renunciation or dispassion alone makes one fearless. We humans, we pride ourselves on one basic thing, that we have a refined sense of self-consciousness. Yes, it's kind of amazing. We are more self-conscious than most living beings. But it has a flip side. And the flip side is well, you can visualize your own demise. As you can visualize your own past, you can also visualize your own future. And this, the humans have been kind of wrestling down through the ages. We have self-consciousness and we are wrestling with these thoughts of the future. Well, death, to complicate things further, in modern times, the physiologic death is one thing. When the person stops breathing, then there is another legal time of death, when the time on the death certificate is written. And the third is the estimated time of death by a medical examiner. However, we are not involved, or we are not interested too much in the legal complexities, but death rules this world. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says of this world, describes this world as Martaloka, the world that is ruled by death. Martya, Mrityu. Mrityu is death. Martya is dying and death. And it's an old Indo-European word where you get mortality, morbidity, mortuary, etc. So we have this word kind of in a very pervasive way, and all things associated with that also comes to mind. Just to bring out the contradictions in our lives. Right now, there are wars going on in many places of the world. Yet, we are more interested in the gas prices. That seems kind of far away. But yet, when it approaches us, our loved ones or people whom we know, it awakens our attention and also our consciousness. The Buddhist, and even Swami Vivekananda uses the term, like a lamp burning. We see the flame, but we don't see the oil in the lamp diminishing. The diminishing of that oil and the burning of the flame are one and the same thing. So there is something called the obverse and the reverse. You have life, and the obverse is death. You can't have life without the constant control processes of programmed cell death, apoptosis. Now, this apoptosis is extremely important. Otherwise, we get cancers, etc. And then there's a final kind of signal that goes out at the end. There's the final apoptosis where all the cells die en masse. We won't be going into eschatology. Now, what's eschatology? It is the theology connected with death, journey, judgment, and destiny of the soul. Nor will be looking at thanatology. Thanatology is investigation into the mechanisms of aspects of death, such as bodily changes, etc., as well as the psychological and the social aspects of this. We will be just kind of touching it briefly according to Eastern philosophy. Thanatos is a minor Greek god associated with death. In Freudian psychology, Thanatos is the deep instinct of death. It is directly opposed to the concept of Eros, the god of love. As we began, that's the most wonderful thing in this world, that yes, we see life, but we don't see the structure of life. And somehow we are trying to disassociate our minds from that inevitability. It's a chilling fact. It is there, and yet we push it away. all forms of diversions, whether you call it movies or this or that, anything that diverts you from thinking. It's not morbidity. It is understanding life at an extremely deeper level. So though we try to distract ourselves, and we know we have had some success in this, yet it is there lurking somewhere in the shadows. Compare our nonchalance with death, like the account of the Buddha. The Buddha saw an old man, a sick man, and a dead man. And it shocked his consciousness. He wanted to unravel the mystery of existence. And that was what led him away from his palace, from his family, from his wife and son. And the next 7-8 years was spent in understanding this mystery of existence. And finally he cracked it. And it wasn't a selfish, you can say, knowledge. He gave it out to the world in the form of the 4 noble truths. Chatvari Arya Satyani, 4-fold noble truths, which leads us to nirvana. This eternal mystery, if you look at some of the literature in this world, you will find philosophers, sages, saints, all types of people, the good, the bad, and the ugly. They have also tried to understand, tried to plumb the depths of what this final, you can say, statement of life is. It takes everybody, the learned, the ignorant, the rich, the poor, the holy, the unholy, the sage and the sinner. It takes the literate and the non-literate, the cultured and the non-cultured, everybody. It's all generally depicted in the West as a kind of a grim reaper. The grim reaper sometimes is in a skeletal form or sometimes robed with a hood that covers his face. And he carries with him his scythe, where he cleaves the soul from the body and carries out. In some traditions, he is also the guide that takes a soul to the other worlds. In many cultures, you have angels and archangels, or in Eastern philosophies also, Eastern mythologies, you have death as a feminine force, and she is beautiful and she comes. She is one of Brahma's, the creator's daughters, called Mrityu. So we have this constant fact of life, and we may think like this is a kind of something new in our civilized society, that we have been kind of thinking about these thoughts. Oh no, it was probably much earlier, even in a hominid, in a primate, you can say, ages, when we were growing into, evolving into these higher and higher Homo sapiens. We are the lucky ones, of course. That these thoughts must have troubled them. Someone in the family or someone in the community dies. And my God, this person was here and the person isn't there. This was a constant threat. In fact, we are living in a much more stable and a safe environment. We've got every protection in place, and yet, of course, we know how insecure we are. In those early days, life was extremely hard, and we need to acknowledge their struggles because they survived and so we are here. This kind of engrossment with something that's here and it's not there now. Where is this person gone? And since they were also intrepid travelers, itinerants, moving from place to place for better shelter and food or whatever, they also thought that the person who died also goes out on a journey, and they used to stock the burial place with provisions, etc. Thus began these rituals. They used to visit those burial spots, and you find it all through the world. Ancient burial sites with symbols, with some writings, with artifacts. They kind of venerated that place, and they also probably mourned, and that's a perfect human sentiment. This was the beginning of religion. This person was here and the person is not there anymore. What happened? Where did the person go? So this puzzlement, this mystery was, as I say, the heart of ancestor worship, and the ancestor worship is at the heart of all religion. All religions began with this question. As Nachiketa in the Katha Upanishad, he asks the king of death, saying, there is this doubt. When a person dies, some say the person exists. Others say that the person does not exist. I want to know the truth. Ye yam prete vichikitsa manushye. That's a beautiful statement. He goes to the king of death and extracts the knowledge and gives it out to us in the form of the Katha Upanishad. So this, when a person dies, what happens? Some say that person is there, some say is not there. Thus began the quest, and the earliest ideas of the soul, it's obvious, was a double. It has to be a double. You are here and there's a kind of a double there within you. And when this person dies, the double survives. And then where does that person go? Thus came the ideas of reward and punishment. Thus came the first ideas of morality in religion. This double survives, and the double to survive has to be in time and in place. I am here, you are there. You exist within time and space, time space. You just cannot think of existence, individual existence, without time and space. So they say that the person goes to a realm, and they named it heaven. And you have these conceptions again in all religions, in all cultures, irrespective of whether they are, you can say, organized or disorganized or institutionalized or not. Every culture, even the most primitive ones, have this concept of a double going to another realm. So this beginning of religions, this idea of reward and punishment, of course, we see bad people and we don't want them to be around when I go to that place. So we kind of conceptualize another place where these guys will all go. And there are hundreds of descriptions about the, you can say, terror of these evil doers, the wicked, the sinful. Then the ideas of morality to held. If you are good and moral, you will go to those realms. Now, they never had a vast conception of, you can say, time and space. But they said they will go there and they will live for ages and ages and ages and ages. As the Upanishad, na asnaya pipasa shokati go modate swargaloke. They will live, there is no hunger, there is no thirst, there is no disease, there is no death, and there will be joy. This will be that realm. And the eternal torment of heaven. These conceptions have gripped the human mind from the very beginning. And this is also one of the reasons why religion has got such a stranglehold. In India, they too kept on discovering deeper and deeper aspects of this morality and reward and punishment and heaven and hells. They never refined it anymore. We have multiple heavens and multiple hells. They came up with the doctrine of karma. They came up with yoga. They came up with the doctrine of the Atman. That is the individual soul and the supreme soul. So these questions kept on pushing human inquiry into higher and higher realms. Say as the body gets old or diseased or is cut down by an accident or something, then comes the first stage. Let's go through a little of, as I say, thanatology and eschatology. Briefly, of course. So like a tree that is kind of felled or it's kind of toppled down. You see the tree, it doesn't wither away immediately. It takes a while for the sap to dry and the leaves and the twigs, etc., to become brittle and snap. So similarly, when a person gives up the body, the pranas, the five vital forces which are there, it's actually one which is divided into five main functions. They start contracting inside. That which was expanded all through the body is now contracted. And as the contractions keep on taking place, those mighty currents within, the psychic currents, also are in a way stilled. They are retracted from the sensory, from the motor organs into the mind. This is the time when you'll find some people exhibiting the final signs of death. But there is still life according to Indian philosophy. It goes down there inside, and this is the moment when the entire, you can say, life of yours is condensed and flashes before you. And the predominant thought emerges. They say that this final thought is the most important thought. Your entire life is kind of concentrated here. So it comes in a kind of flash. You see a whole life there. Externally, your body is kind of inert. And like the falling of the tree and it's drying up, slowly the sap withers, etc., etc. It is at this point where they say the top of the heart, the intellect, deep heart in the sense your very core, the top brightens up. And as it brightens up, it's ready to leave like a leech that goes to the end of a stalk of grass and its weight pulls it towards another stalk of grass. It's ready now to depart. It is at this time where people really get frightened. It is one of the most exquisite, the most beautiful, the most superb, the most, joyous experience that a person can have. There is no fear. There is no pain. Let me again say, there is no fear, there is no pain, no anxiety, no anguish, nothing. It's a mighty release. It's like a bird that has been caged, is suddenly freed and flies up. It is exactly this experience, and it is essential for us to understand that this slaying of the specter of death, that we don't know about the finer mechanisms. If you know that the actual experience of death is divine, if I could say that, then it makes a kind of a impact maybe in some people's mind. Yeah, the other processes might be painful, which lead you to it. There are some who don't go through any kind of pain, they just go straight out. That's wonderful. But the actual experience of death is beyond fear, beyond pain, beyond everything that you. It's the most intense experience that a soul ever gets. Then finally, as the final prana in the body yanks itself out, that is, they say that the example given is like a spirited horse pulls out the pegs on which it has been kind of trammeled. So does the final, you can say, release. The person just throws out the body. The Bhagavad Gita says, like a person changes the clothes, so does the soul then change his body. This is how we can see this. The Bhagavad Gita sloka is Vasansi Jirnani Yata Vihaya. And like the body is like a garment is discarded and puts on new ones, so also the soul takes on a newer body. Now, in case, just in case, which we will see, there is a kind of sometimes a wrong call. The person is asked to go back. Hey, go back. You don't have to. Hey, what happened? There is something called the near-death experiences, and technically it is these near-death experiences that we now hear about and are being studied and seriously, not dismissed. There was a time when this was dismissed. We think that it's just kind of something new here and okay, a new phenomena. It isn't. It is as ancient as that specter of death. And this is the secondary reason for religion. There are those who step out, experience that immeasurable bliss, and they come back and they tell people about that. So this was the, you can say, the motor also of religion, that at times we find that there are persons who go across and then come back. So there are some common characteristics in this. The first is detachment from the body, feelings of kind of levitation, warmth, complete security, the dissolution of pain, the presence of light, and so on. I'll enumerate them once again to let it get fixed in your mind. And these are general characteristics. Let me be specific. I'm not talking about a particular kind of person with a particular experience. There are some general characteristics about this near-death experience. And there, like I said, first, the idea that one is outside the body and floating about. Okay. The second is tremendous joy. The third, entering into a space. At times, it is depicted like a kind of a tunnel, and that tunnel opens up to a vaster space. This space stretches to kind of infinity, and it is at times, the general conception is they see the universe floating beneath them, sometimes around them. They see a bright, warm, and loving light. It can be of different colors. Then there's the experience of great peace. You feel you are in a place that you belong, it's your own. There are, of course, people who come back, especially those who weren't ready for this. They see something frightening and they get terrorized. So let me put that also into it. Then there is always an encounter with a loved one, with a parent, or someone, sibling, or you can say wife. They also at this stage, after this encounter with a loved one, they encounter a kind of a disembodied voice, and the voice is so calm and so secure and so loving and so beautiful, it enraptures you. These are called guides, or at this point, some also see some religious figures. It is here that they discover, or they are told by these disembodied, you can say, presence and the voice. It's not something that you hear, that the whole thing flashes in the mind. The plan of the universe, the plan of creation is love. And the feeling, the experience is so strong. They understand this finally. Then comes a kind of a short review of your life. And then comes a choice, or sometimes a command. Go back and learn. Or you need to go and right the wrongs, or go tell the others what you've experienced. And these people, they come back. Now when they come back, as I said, the tree which had fallen down and kind of apparently dead suddenly kind of revives. The prana somehow, they had contracted and come down to the very edge of the top of the core of one's heart, the intelligence. It has left, and then suddenly it is yanked back inside, and then it expands all through the mind and the senses and the body. So there are these people who have a near death experience. This is actually what religion takes, these bits of, you can say, data, and builds on them. So the specter of death now is countered by this vaster vision of life and the afterlife. So much for near death experiences. So you can see how humans have been impelled in their search. And again, to re-emphasize, this is not a new phenomena. It has been there with humanity for millions of years. I mean, before we were humans. In the Vedanta philosophy, apart from a gross body which is felt here, you have something called a subtle body. And the very fact that you could go and experience and understand and remember and all these things means that you have a mind still, you have intelligence still, you have the senses, the motor and the, you can say, perceptual senses, and you have memory. And so the subtle body is full of these components. In Vedanta, they say there are 19 components in a subtle body. It's like a counterpart of the gross body in a subtle form. And in this, they say that all the residue of all that you have done lies there. It's a receptacle of your karma. There is another deeper body there within us. So Vedanta, you say we have three bodies. The gross body, that's kind of comes and goes, subtle body, and then the causal body. These two bodies will remain till one becomes liberated. So this is what reincarnates. So how, about you and me and everyone, how do we slay the specter of death? Just kind of impossible. How can? The more one's body consciousness is, the more there is a fear of death. The more you have spiritual thoughts, the less is your fear of death. Put in some, I hope I can disabuse you of this idea of the specter of death. But it is like, as the Bhagavad Gita says, prayana kale manasa chalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva. So one of the best ways to conquer the fear of death presented by the scriptures is through yoga. Bhruvor madhye pranam avesh. You take all the prana, the life energies back here in the center of your brows and say Om and give up the body. This is giving up the body in the state of yoga. I think this is kind of, so it won't happen in a day because you got to practice it. Karma yoga. Swamiji says, they only live who live for others. The rest are more dead than alive. So if you are living for others, you are being unselfish. And as you get more and more and more unselfish, the less is the fear of death. It is the contraction of oneself. It is the death of that ego that is kind of frightening. What happens? What will happen? The ego is a kind of is a phantom out here. And if you can get the idea that it is a phantom and that it does not really exist, then you will be overcoming the specter of death. Then we come down to, so this is karma yoga. And then we come down to bhakti yoga. Constant thoughts of the divine are the very best way that one can conquer and slay the specter of death. Constantly, the spiritual thoughts are the strongest things. It can counteract every kind of fear. The word or name of God, which is given to those initiated, is called a mantra. The technical meaning is manana trayate, that on which one contemplates on and with protects one. So it is this mantra which actually protects you. But of course, you receive it and you can take any mantra for that matter. It has to be repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated till it becomes alive. It's called mantra chaitanya. The mantra becomes awakened. Then you have no more kind of fear. Then we come down to something called the Gyan Yoga, the yoga of knowledge. It is here that these ancient Indian sages and saints, they discovered an entity that is beyond the gross body, the subtle body, the causal body, and they found that it is infinite. And in various places they have kind of tried to drill it into our heads that our real existence is that Atman. Savayesha Mahanaja Atma, this great self, the Atman. And so it's put so beautifully, it's infinite. It is existence, consciousness, bliss. This is the doctrine of the Atman. Those who would like to come to this aspect of conquest of death, the slaying of the specter of death, will find there is no fear of death. Swami Vivekananda, one time, he was in Kashmir and he says, well, you see, when death approaches me, he takes 2 pebbles from the stream and knocks them. I become as hard as that. Death, there is no more terror. There is no more anguish. There is nothing. You will find then that there is a tremendous sense of joy and peace and love and bliss. If you can get that, you've got it. Otherwise, we all will be under the thraldom of death. And we'll always be quaking. It will, that fear, though it is kind of suppressed in a way, is always there, as I said, lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce on you. This will be your personal conquest, and your personal conquest will be the conquest for humanity. humanity as a whole. Om, peace, peace, peace. In the name of the Lord. Hari.